Our next guest is Birgitta Jonsdottir. I had a lot of fun interviewing her. She's got a very wonderful personality. And before she became a member of the Icelandic Parliament in April 2009, she worked as a writer, artist, activist, web developer, and designer. She says that she's everything but your traditional politician. She's a poetician, which I love. Her political views are not expressed because she thinks that politics are something beyond her everyday life. Politics is life. Being political is having opinions. Every person has the opportunity to change the world, and that is Birgitta Jonsdottir's philosophy. Birgitta Jonsdottir, welcome to Cindy Sheehan Soapbox.
Thank you so much for having me, giving me a chance to stand on the soapbox.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your commitment. I know you're a huge advocate for transparency, internet freedom, and whistleblowers, but also for peace. You've been a long-time peace activist, haven't you?
Yes, I have, ever since I can remember, actually. So I was fortunate enough to have a mother that was very active in the peace movement in Iceland. And she was also Iceland's first woman to be so-called troubatrix. She made music to her own songs and would travel around Iceland playing for, working class people, old people, and anybody that wanted to listen to her. But she made music to the most amazing poetry. Mm-hmm. By Icelandic poets. So I started on very early to understand the fundamentals in life.
You are very fortunate. I didn't start, and I always felt this way, but I didn't start being an activist till my son was killed. And I often think, what would it have been like if, things were different? But you can't look back. You can only look forward.
Exactly. I mean, I think the biggest change in my life was actually when my father died. I was around 20. Mm-hmm. And it made me go into a very profound soul search to try to understand what I needed to do in order to both go beyond my own self-destruction, but most importantly, how could I learn from this to be a better person. Mm-hmm. So I was, I've been fortunate. Often people think that tragedies are bad, but, as difficult as they are when you are feeling them, it is just like in society, the only time in our lives when we're ready to take on profound change.
Right. Well, it's, first of all, unfortunately, tragedy, heartbreak is a human condition, but I think the victory or the healing of that comes with our personal response to it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many ways we can go, and I think that's where we have a choice on which way are we going to go. So, once in a while when I have an extremely interesting guest, and you're one of those times, all my guests are interesting, but sometimes I have extremely interesting guests. And I would like to thank you also because you're going to be, our featured guest on our 5th anniversary show. So, thank you so much for that. But
wow.
I know, I can't believe we've been on for 5 years already. I open it up to my supporters and listeners to ask questions, and you're one of my Facebook friends, so you were involved in this discussion on my Facebook wall yesterday. But as you see, there's a lot of people who were very interested, in asking you questions. Now, here in the United States and all over the internet, especially Facebook, there's a lot of memes about how Iceland really made those evil bankers pay for what they did to the country, but that's not exactly true, is it? And I think that I'd like to hear, cause we need a good model of what to do in these situations, but we need true models, not fake legends. So, Birgitta, could you tell my listeners about what really happened in Iceland over the horrible economic collapse?
Yes, I can, and I'm very pleased that I can maybe break some of the myths. I mean, a lot of good things happened, but not all of the myths are true. So I'm going to just go through it state by state, because I know people are looking for inspiration, and I totally agree with you. It is so important that the inspiration is based on facts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first thing that happened was that the government that was sitting during the financial collapse desperately tried to bail out the banks. They went seeking for loans with our allies and friends, but our allies and friends said, no, we're not going to give you money so that you can carry on in this insanity. So we didn't receive any loans, and thus there had to be a plan B. And then this plan B was actually quite good, because it meant that we did not bail out the banks because we simply couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's important that people understand that prior to the collapse in Iceland, 5 years earlier, the banks were privatized. And in that process, something criminal happened. The new bank owners didn't really buy them. They just lent each other money for the first payment.
Right.
And so the level of corruption was so deep, despite the fact that on the index for corruption, Iceland was ranked the least corrupt country. And I remember when I saw that, I couldn't believe my eyes. I didn't know if I should cry or laugh.
I know.
I actually did both. And so because we're very tiny, there are 320,000 people living in Iceland. Our economy is very fragile. So during the times of privatization, the banksters used a loophole, because we are not a part of the EU, but we are part of the EEA, the European Economic Area, which means that 80% of our laws are EU laws. And so when people say we shouldn't join the EU, we are sort of in the EU without the privileges of actually being able to impact any lawmaking.
Uh-huh.
So that's one myth that I need to shatter as well. So they used the loophole in the EEA law and created banks in other countries. And then a very incredible Ponzi scam started. And by the end of it, they had expanded the debt to 5 times our GDP, just in 5 years.
Wow.
Unbelievable. And of course, it can never be justified that these debts would be rolled over on the taxpayers' shoulders. But that was the intention of the previous government, that the people then actually were so shocked because, like, it was because we are small. They managed somehow to keep the banks open, so there wasn't like a massive run on any banks or anything like that. But because of what happened, we were faced with something like a complete discredit in the rest of the world, and the British government used an anti-terrorist law on Iceland, which led to none of the Icelandic companies or others that had credit lines could have any credit lines, and living on an island and facing food and medicine shortages did not help. And we were forced during this very sensitive time to sign a memorandum of understanding that we would roll over the so-called ISIV accounts onto the shoulders of the nation. And I can sort of understand the previous finance minister, like, sitting with all the big cats at the EU at this special meeting, being faced with either I sign this memorandum of understanding or there will not be food in Iceland.
Wow.
And so he did. And but in it, there was like the ironic part was that the British and the Dutch governments, both being previous colonist nations, treated us like their previous colony, even if we were not theirs ever, and smeared a lot of interest on this debt that they wanted the Icelandic nation to acknowledge as a national debt instead of a private debt. And so that was one thing that we managed to actually stop. And that was through a joint, that was because of the people of Iceland. That was not solely resting on the Icelandic president. And it is important that people understand that the Icelandic president is merely a cookie decoration. He is not like the US president. He is like, because we have an old constitution that is recycled from the Danish, which they were our colonists until 1944. He is sort of like a king rather than a president. And it is the government, the governmental body that makes all the main decisions. And but after he had been sort of partying quite wildly with the banksters, the Icelandic oligarchs, and praising them. So he was very unpopular at the time after the collapse. So his only choice was, when the nation pleaded with him to not sign, his role is to sign laws, not to sign it. His only choice to regain some sort of grace was to do the bidding of the nation. There was a massive campaign to get to stop this, because if we would have acknowledged this debt, we would have gone bankrupt. And not only that, like almost all our income tax would have gone into only paying the interest of this debt. So this was massive stuff, and we managed to get actually national referendums twice on the ISAFE contract. We did not, and we haven't been able, it is very complicated to get banksters into jail.
Right.
They have been sort of charged, but they're taken into higher courts. There were quite a heavy sentencing quite recently, but they're not yet in prison. And there have some people been put into prison, but they get very easily off, like, their prison terms and so forth. We have a very different justice system in Iceland. So, life in prison is only 16 years, and you usually only serve that time, half that time. But, compared to Icelandic, prison sentencing, the newest and the biggest, ruling was for 5 years, which is quite big in Iceland. But in my opinion, they ruined so many people's lives.
Right.
There are people that will never recover from what happened here. And so I think they're getting off actually quite light. But I would prefer to see the white-collar criminals actually go into community work for the rest of their lives, working as garbage collectors or whatever. Because, I think that, at some states, our laws are actually, we have to acknowledge that all the laws in the world, and this is what I've discovered since I became a parliamentarian, all the laws in our world are not written by the people that are representing. It is written by lobbyists.
Right.
And it is this perfect marriage between the corporate and the state that is one of the big factors in killing our societies.
Well, if we believe in restorative justice, then, the so-called punishment fitting the crime, makes more sense. Like, people think that George Bush and Dick Cheney should be executed for war crimes, but I think they should probably be put to work mopping floors in Iraqi orphanages or something like that. I think that would be, but I don't know, would that punish the people of Iraq even more to have to see their ugly faces every day. We don't need to.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we don't need to punish them anymore. Well, I'm glad you're talking about this, because the image that we get here in the United States is you have banksters chained to the walls in dungeons there. And, researching this, our interview, I found that it's quite different, but I think it's quite different because it's more quaint. Your system, you don't have a lot of white collar crime, so you don't have any people that, really know how to prosecute it, or any laws that, are, relevant to what happened in Iceland. But is that why you ran for parliament and, through this whole scandal?
I sort of just randomly happened to enter into parliament. I, of course, never had any aspiration to be a politician. That's why I define myself rather as an activist or a poetician.
I love that, poetician. That's great.
So, but I feel like because I was one of the very few people that was constantly protesting during the good times in Iceland. So I had been upholding protests for 9 months outside the Chinese embassy because of their treatment of Tibetans. And so when the collapse came, I was the only sort of super known protester, so everybody was sort of calling me and asking me, where do I get megaphones, and do you need permits for this? And so I immediately sort of got involved in helping with the protests, and was a part of a think tank that was created by a very diverse group of people on what we needed to do in order to prevent this from happening again. And this think tank sort of developed into a coalition of different grassroots movements. And in the end, we all felt that in order to achieve true change, we needed to go inside the system to legalize direct democracy, and to make some legal tools so that we didn't have to stand and protest and throw food at a house in order to get rid of a government. And actually at some states, the protests were actually transforming into violence, which is very uncommon in Iceland because we are a nation, our police doesn't even carry guns, and we don't have a military. So, but one of the main things that I felt were important, and was one of the reasons I sort of helped co-create this political movement, was that I felt that we needed to change our constitution, and I felt that the people needed to do it, and I felt that it was important to create a new bridge into parliament that was a bridge between the general public and this place of power.
Right.
And I also, I felt it was very important to work on transparency and freedom of information legislation and so forth, and accountability. So these were sort of my things. I also promised to be the annoying fly in the tent if I would get in there, and I certainly have.
Right.
And yeah, so we actually, after the collapse, some of the really interesting things that happened was that we got 7.2% of the vote, my political movement, on no budget. 8 weeks prior to elections, we were created. I decided to run in my constituency like a month before the elections. And I was sort of shocked when I realized that I was sort of a public figure all of a sudden. And, but this demand for a new constitution is not new. The current constitution was always, a sort of a temporary, constitution. But the people in power do not want the general public to make the constitution. Right. So despite this fact, we did a beautiful project, the Icelandic people. And so the previous government that was just elected out of the parliament in April this year, they set out with a little help from my political movement to start this quest for having the people participate in discussing and shaping the new constitution. And the beauty of doing that is, like, even like in the United States, you have, a good constitution, but most people don't understand all the rules that have been applied to it.
Right.
So you might have a really good sort of basis, but there has been no discussion about all the additional rules that fit in with the constitution. So you never know if somebody is breaking it or not. Like, I participated in suing Obama for additions to the NDAA last year, which are very dangerous additions, giving the military the right to arrest anybody anywhere on the suspicion of terrorism without trial and everything. So I helped or participated in this project with Chomsky and Chris Hedges and many other great people.
Right.
And we won, and then we lost, of course.
Right.
So usually, the first stage of justice is relatively good, and then you have to start to question the higher up you go, less justice is available. And of course, laws are written by and for the 1%, because they are the people that help create the laws, and they always evade the laws. It's a very interesting coincidence. But the constitutional process is so important, not only for us here in Iceland. It is a discussion about what sort of society you want to be. And every generation has the right to discuss this, because we might shift and change our perspectives and focuses, even if, like, of course, there is always certain amendments that are just sort of holy, like privacy. Oh, I forgot, it's been broken so badly that you don't know what it is
It's
anymore.
not holy anymore. It's holy, but it's HOLEY, not HOLY. It's filled with holes.
Mm-hmm. And so in the constitutional process, we did everything right. Apart from, of course, doing lots of mistakes because we're doing this for the first time. And those that were against the process made sure to try to use all the tiny errors to destroy the legitimacy of the project. And so in the end, this beautifully crafted new constitution has been thrown into the shredder just in the last few days of the last parliament, and the young new leaders of the new of the left, they were fooled, and they by the now current ministers that run the country. So it was a shame, but I think it is important to bear in mind, even if we didn't finalize it, we still have that document.
Right.
And we had also some really other sort of profound changes. And I think perhaps one of the most important changes in our societies was that the old structure of the parties is sort of eroding and collapsing. We usually have 5 parties in parliament. We now have 6.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I ran for the Pirate Party, which I helped create in Iceland, which is a party focusing on 21st century legislation in relation to privacy, freedom of information and expression, copyright reform, and direct democracy. And these are all things that are very, very important to me. And just the fact that Iceland is the first country in the world to elect pirates in their parliament is a sign that we are still relatively open-minded. We also had an incredible mayor that is going to quit. He for the biggest city in Iceland. An incredibly brilliant installation artist and a comedian who put humanity and humanitarian work as his main focus, and he would have been easily re-elected as a mayor, but he decided to quit. It was just too painful to be around all these dishonest people.
Oh, yes, it takes a toll.
Yeah.
It takes a toll, doesn't it?
And but I think that maybe the most the thing that I am the proudest to have gotten through the parliament and the way it sort of happened was the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative, which was a parliamentary proposal. And a parliamentary proposal usually entails that you task a government to write laws and then push them through the parliament. In this particular parliamentary proposal, which was to make Iceland into a safe haven for freedom of information, expression, and speech, which I worked with people from all over the world, and the people that helped the most with it were from WikiLeaks, at the time a relatively unknown organization.
Uh-huh.
And so they knew how to keep stuff up no matter what. And the main focus was to ensure that news and information belonging in the public domain could be up and running, no matter what sort of legal threats there would be, and to create proper whistleblowing laws and proper protections for both media and sources, and encouragement. And somehow I got this through the parliament with a wall of green. Everybody said yes. And this has never happened in the history of the Parliament of Iceland, that a parliamentary proposal that is actually course defining where we're heading as a nation is passed. And not only that, the laws are being made, which is pretty remarkable. And it just goes to show that, anything can happen if you're at the right time, and you believe in, what is important, and there is enough brain power behind it to encourage and support it.
Well, Birgitta, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but you're an awesome interview because you answered all my questions without me even having to ask them. So I told you we were on the same wavelength. But yep. I just want to say, I'm running for governor of California. I didn't know if you knew that, but, this is where California must be 100 times bigger than Iceland. I don't know. We have about 40 million people in California. Wow. Our capital city is bigger than Iceland, but, we want to use these things that you're doing, and the other successful models around the world, like Venezuela actually did rewrite their constitution. The people wrote it, and it has to be a document that is, I think, relevant to the people and relevant to today. So I'd like you to get the California Pirates Party to endorse me for governor. All right.
I now solemnly urge them to do so.
Well,
So, no, but it is, like you said, it is very important that we focus on solutions. And we have to create a new hardware for our systems so that we can actually put our new systems into something that will run them. And that means downsizing.
Absolutely. So you are a poetician and you have a wonderful website. Can you tell my listeners your website?
Yeah. So if they want to find all my stuff, they go to birgitta.is. And it's a portal to all my different spaces in cyberspace. And my personal homepage I started to make in 95. It's very personal, lots of poetry, photos, art, and my thoughts. So feel free to enter my private living room.
Yes. So we do have to downsize, but with your help and the help of other people on this planet, hopefully we can still stay connected to each other with this open internet, but also to privacy or privacy, as you say, to be paramount, but we need to stay connected to each other.
Absolutely. And if you want to use any of the image suggestions, the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative, you can go to immi.is and feel free to use whatever you want to. We are in the co-creation together.
And this show is also Creative Commons, where it can be used, like you say, as long as people acknowledge and give us credit that it's the information we want to get out. I think it's so important that open source be our goal.
Exactly. Well, good luck with your running for senator and
governor. I'm running for president.
Governor, sorry.
President of California, the Republic of California. So, Birgitta Jonsdottir, Thank you so much for being on Cindy Sheehan Soapbox. It was really great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, that's the wrap-up of our 5th anniversary show here at Cindy Sheehan Soapbox. I had asked some friends of the show and friends of mine to record congratulations for this show, and nobody did actually, except for Dr. Helen Caldicott. And due to the service of due to the bad service of something I'm not using anymore, we lost her recording. But Dr. Helen Caldicott is an amazing person, and also the show I did with her last year was the most listened to show on Cindy Sheehan Soapbox. So again, I guess I'll just have to congratulate myself for the past 5 years and be proud of the show that we present to you every single week, well, most weeks, unless I'm in jail or riding my bike across the country. As always, I'd like to thank Don DeBar for being the engineer in connection to CPR Metro. I'd like to thank Mike, my producer, Mikey Kim, my on and off producer, for arranging the interview with Birgitta. And as always, I'd like to thank you for listening and for supporting the show. I'm Cindy Sheehan. You've been listening to Cindy Sheehan Soapbox. Peace out for now.